Welcome to my Beautystack. My name is Sharmadean Reid and I'm the founder of the Beautystack app and host of this podcast. I'm passionate about beauty and business, and every week I'll be speaking to a founder or CEO on the role that beauty has played in their careers. We discuss their beginnings, their learnings, and find out who are the professionals that keep them feeling powerful every day. Join me on this journey of reassessing how beauty plays an important role, not only in our professional lives but in wider society. And finally, I hope you discover your next favourite beauty spot, as recommended by our incredible guests.
She saw something in me that I had never seen for myself, which was to be an image, a face, a body, a person in modeling and in the fashion industry that had purpose.
That's Paloma Elsesser. After being discovered by Pat McGrath and fronting her first beauty line, she's become the voice for positive body image as well as race. Paloma has walked runways for New York, Paris and London fashion weeks and has been on the cover of British Vogue. She's also on the selection committee for the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund Award and is my favourite travel buddy as a member of the International Girl Crew.
Welcome, Paloma.
Hello.
Babes.
Babes. Hi, you're pretty. I'm well. New York is a little gloomy today, but I've kind of been in a mood. It's been cute. I feel I don't know, the days are just becoming one.
Yeah, blending into one. But you grew up in LA, so do you ever get seasonal disorder in New York? Because the thing about LA is it's sunny all the time. No wonder everyone's so peppy.
I've lived here for so long, and I think that kind of would spin me out. I think growing up that there was no seasons. I really appreciated the seasons in New York. I feel like they all serve a very specific purpose and an emotional bridge to the other, because it can't always be sunny. It can't always be gorgeous, sexy, sweaty New York summer. It's not always winter. It was I also think a real livable example. I think when I moved here, I had just turned 18, of impermanence, that things are going to change, New York is going to change, there's nothing I can do about it. So I quite like it. I think I also, with work and stuff now, I don't know, I get to get out of the winter a lot. And I don't know, because of good old global warming, there hasn't even really been a real winter here. So yeah, seasonal depression is, I get summer depression. I don't know, it can hit anytime. Anytime, babe.
What was life like for you growing up in LA? Where did you grow up?
Okay, so, well, you know this, but I guess everybody knows.
I actually don't know anything about your LA life.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I was born in the UK. I was born in Northwest London in a bathtub in Kentish Town. My dad is Chilean and Swiss, but grew up in London. And we left when I was 2. And so I grew up in LA. I don't have any real early memories of the UK at all. But I think I had a really interesting upbringing. I think it was a little bit distorted now that I look back. And I've now been able to kind of label these experiences a lot better. But my parents, I grew up in hippie poverty, hippie poor, which I think is different than when I just say oh yeah, I grew up with no money, which I didn't, but it was artist style, very community oriented, who grew up going to powwows and practicing capoeira, but for free, and all these weird things that I knew were different. And I definitely knew that there was some identity stuff wrapped in being lower income, growing up not in lower income housing, but in a lower income household. But I was so rich in experiences and all these things, going to Joshua Tree and the African marketplace growing up, and all this stuff that I didn't early on feel that I was without. But I always went to predominantly white, affluent private schools, which is then when I realized that I was without. But it was also really strange for me because the neighborhood that I grew up in, like after where I grew up for most of my life was like lower middle class Black neighborhood, but it like brushed shoulders with like, you know, the hood essentially. So I felt that I was just always a bit confused in where I landed in these things. And then when I went to school, there wasn't really that many people that looked like me, who let alone even just like looked like me. Like I even felt disconnected from the Black and brown counterparts at my school also because like I grew up like eating tofu and like stuff like that. So I felt very alone in like my spirit and my body, but it also had a really like enriching LA life, you know. I
actually think a lot of people don't know your mum's Black. Someone said the other day, they were like, isn't she like Latina? I was like, no, her mum's Black. Like I could
Yeah. Honestly, you guys have the exact same coloring, like 100%. Immensely. Sorry?
Where she's from? Have you ever done a DNA test?
No, my mom. So yeah, we grew up. My mom's African American. We don't know. I think that kind of like what the lineage was always really focused on was like the advocacy and like of our like forefathers. Like my grandfather grew up like poor, no artist, poor, just like straight up poor in like the sticks of Tennessee. Like, you know, he was a conscientious objector, a Quaker. Like when he opposed the war, he was essentially put into a concentration camp, like things that were a labor camp essentially for Black workers. And then, you know, our grandparent and my great grandparents just always forward focus like conversations around injustice. So I think that my family, my mom's side of the family, and I take great pride in the African American experience for them. And actually only when I became much closer, like throughout high school, whatever, or just kind of became conscious of it in interacting with my Black British friends, when I would say, oh, my mom's Black and my dad's and Swiss, and they'd be like, what kind of Black? And I was like, Black, like, what do you mean? And they'd be like, Jamaican, Nigerian, like, what do you mean Black? And I was like, oh, well, we don't know because of like slavery. But that's kind of where it was centered, but I never felt, I don't know. I think that I was so empowered and so focused and excited, not even excited, but so proud of just like my family's, is it frozen? It's a little frozen. But, my mom's side of the family's like lineage on, you know, American soil that I never thought about until later. And so, yeah, we have yet to do that.
I actually think that's like a really lovely thing, because even the way that I asked when I was like, does your mum know where she's from? Because in England, exactly like you said, people are very, very attached to their heritage. But understanding the Black American experience historically it's very, very complicated and different. And I would actually, you know, if I challenge some of my friends on, do you know about Jamaican history, or do you know about your country and Africans history? They might not know it in as complex, detailed and layers as Black Americans do about the Black American experience. So I always, sometimes I see this argument online, like sometimes I'll just follow a few people to like dip into like, I wonder what the right way to discuss a Black British and a Black American experience. I'll like observe and gather information and knowledge, but ultimately I'm like, why are we at conflict about this? It's so basic, like, you know, there's nothing. It's another way to pit people against each other, to pit Black people against each other, I think.
100%. I mean, I think like in navigating my Blackness, it's interesting for me because, you know, my prescribed and my ascribed identities are not the same. I identify as Black. I grew up, or mixed, but, you know, I think being raised predominantly in a Black household. I didn't grow up in a Chilean household. I grew up in a Black household. I grew up in a duplex with my grandparents downstairs. My very Black, very South, you know, from Tennessee grandparents. And kind of like my colloquialisms are all attached to being Black, you know. Not only exclusively, I think it's much more nuanced than that. But as I got older, I started to become, not even older, pretty early, like, you know, after 5 or 6 or 7, being aware that, like, I identified as Black, but I knew I didn't look like my mom. And I knew that most people thought that I was Hispanic, and how to navigate that in a way that felt like comfortable for me. But I think having more language around it, and now being able to reclaim it, identify it, but also understand, like, on a spectrum of privilege, in that, like, when I'm called on it, it doesn't mean that I am not Black, but it is that I operate in the world differently than you do, than my mom does. I think it is kind of specific, and I'm also, like, have been very inspired to take this conversation, like, into what it's like to be birthed and raised by a Black woman, and what the attachment to Blackness is like, because I've had conversations with some of my friends, you know, in reference to, like, one drop, my mixed friends, in reference to, like, one drop theory, but the case, and even like a lot of, you know, the academic literature is around the experience of the white mom and the Black father. Mm-hmm. And I think that is also an experience that I can't speak to, because that's not my lived experience. But I also I think in high school, I remember, you know, Hispanic people, it might be like, you don't speak Spanish, or, you know, are you Mexican? And, like, not really knowing how to respond to that. And then even my Black cousins being like, you're adopted, you're, you know, and not feeling like or feeling that my Blackness was came for. But I don't feel that way as much anymore, because I don't feel like I have to defend it. And it's also, if, like, my purpose is to be in, like, allyship for those who are, like, even more intensely, like, marginalized than I am, which is, like, a Black woman, like, I'm not going to suck up the air in all of that, you know, and be like, you know, I also think that there's so many things and beautiful parts of, like, what Blackness is now that we get to see. You know, I think even my siblings, who we have similar coloring, but we have very different hair patterns. And I can never speak to what, you know, labor it is for my mother and for my sister and or my brother, who have different curl patterns and different hair and different hair practices, and how they take care of it. You know, I can't speak to it. And it's not that, like, oh, I think that there was, like, a lot of, like, language around, like, oh, you're lucky and blah, 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 blah. It's just, like, my hair was different.
Did you ever feel condemned by your Black community when you were growing up for your hair?
I think it's just, no pun intended, conditioning. But you know, I think that there's just a praise of, like, good hair. I was always quite confused with, like, a good hair and a bad, you know, and stuff like that, because I remember some early memories of my grandmother always praised, you know, she's always praised my hair. Oh, honey, you have such nice hair. You have, you know, but this, mind you, like, my grandmother is a 93-year-old Black woman who grew up in the South, you know, and so, like, those are the phrases that she grew attached to, you know.
100%. Like, I remember actually, like, Chris Rock, I rated him so much for that documentary on good hair. Yeah. When I was younger, it came out quite a long time ago now, and watching that documentary really, really, like, made me rethink what people mean when they say good hair, and how exactly, like you've said, we've been conditioned to believe that that's the right hair to have. Like, I'm a Black mom of a child that could have been your little baby. Like, Roman as a little baby looks like you as a little baby, and it's the same thing where they could be any race. Like, he could be Mexican, Spanish, Italian, Moroccan. Every country we go to, people think he's their child. And the same, you know, he has super long, straight hair. And instantly, to be honest, from the minute I got pregnant with his father, who is Italian-Irish, thought he was Italian-Irish and is now South African, story ever from his DNA test. But the fact, the minute I got pregnant, I remember thinking, how am I going to keep this child black? Like, how am I going to keep him culturally black? And I almost, what I'm jealous of, how Jewish children go to Saturday school, Jewish school.
Hebrew school.
There should be a Jamaican school for like minority children in white neighborhoods to keep. Someone needs to fry him a dumpling and like grease his scalp and like, what I mean?
Literally. I mean, I think it's so interesting you say that because you know what my nephew looks like. My older sister, we do not share a dad, and her dad is Jamaican. Oh my gosh, I actually think her dad is Jamaican and Indian, like, which is really interesting. So she is, for all intents and purposes, she's black. She lives in the world as a black woman. She's ascriptively black. And her husband is white Irish. And my nephew came out with red hair, very fair skin, like not like Blake Griffin vibes where it's like sometimes there's like, not like Adjoa, like where it's like red hair fair. It's like he will live in the world potentially, depending on like how his like melanin like percolates as a white man. And my sister is very, I think that it was really charged for her early on. She got every time mislabeled every time for being the nanny, for being, a lot of like really painful experiences. As he's grown into his features, they look identical. It just happens to be that he has very fair skin and red hair. But essentially, like what she's always bringing into play is like she just recently like did like a 6-back cornrow in his hair, and like it's important still for him to like understand that. And like as we begin, I think just even in the last 5 years and like pushing the conversation around like mixed identities to the forefront, because like just statistically speaking, there's more and more mixed people, more and more mixed children. And I do believe, I wish that there was more like literature, more conversations, like more of this stuff, just to like keep the thoughts in my head safe, all of this important, all of these really important like bullet points of what it is to be mixed. It's also like, to be mixed, to be black, to be brown, like is to also experience like a whole spectrum of, or have the potential of what it looks like. Do you know what I mean? Like with bullet points, the experience evolves. Like that's, you said an amazing point when you're like, as his melanin percolates and as he comes into his features, like the thing about being mixed is that your experience evolves as you go through your life cycle. Like when I was younger, I looked way more Indian. So I was so much more exotic. I didn't look like any of my family. Everyone would always say that same thing. Oh, you got pretty hair or red skin or whatever. And then as I got older and I started looking more Jamaican, it was a different thing. It was way more sexualized. It was like, oh, you look like your mum, like Patra and all of this stuff as I was growing up. And I think that experience constantly changes. And, I think as well, it's funny because when babies are born, they're always paler, they're always fairer until they've like been exposed to the world. And like Roman was born really, really pale. And I remember like being like, when's this color going to come through? And I feel like many, black moms who have had mixed race children probably like felt that or thought it. And it's like, I almost felt protective over it. Like I remember thinking, but this is my family name and my family thing. And I felt like really, really attached to the blackness in him. And I grew his hair out long, like till he was 5 or 6, because I wanted him to have it like tied back. I wanted to use products in it. I wanted him to go through the experience of having to do his hair. I know that sounds really like weird, but like since he started cutting his hair, I think when he was 6, and it was actually, on some ways it was
Do you know what he wanted to look like? He said, "Can you cut my hair? Because I want to look like Dunkirk." You know,
yes, he loved the movie.
Wanted his hair like Harry Styles from Dunkirk. And I was like, in my head, I was like, no, you want to look like a little boy who's white. And I started like being upset. But then I always kind of, you know, we have discussions about his decisions. And the minute we cut his hair, he didn't have to do it anymore. So he doesn't have, like, you used this word before about hair. Even though his hair's pretty much the same as yours, he didn't have the labour of having to do his hair every morning from like aged 1 to 5. Mm-hmm. And I just thinking that is a part of the Black beauty experience anyway that's going to be taken away from you. And what I do now, which is very Black mom, is every morning I smear cocoa butter all over his face and he like cringes from it. I want to
I think it's interesting. I did my hair like this yesterday. I grew up with, both of my parents had dreads growing up, like, so, and I think because I was my parents' first child together, and I think my mom was really shocked at how I came out. Like, I came out looking like a little like Native American like cherub. I was 10 pounds, had so much hair, dark hair, like I think, and so even then kind of referencing like these like early adoptive practices, I actually think my mom didn't know what to do with my hair. And I was very tender-headed. And I also have very early memories in like this kind of like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't know, like a vault, whatever, when your grandmother like sends you to the shop for the first time to get you. So my grandmother sent me to the shop, rite of passage, thank you. I'm like, this quarantine brain is like not working. But these rite of passage. And it's like, I'm one of 14 grandchildren. I have a bunch of girl cousins, and like my grandma would send us to the hair shops, like, you know, if it was like a big Easter thing at the church or whatever. And I went to go get my blowout, but like they pulled out a flat iron, and my grandma was up in arms because she was like, you can't put a flat iron, not a flat iron, a hot comb to my hair. And my grandmother was livid. Yeah. But even this like Black hair salon, like, you know, this beauty shop, like they didn't know also what specifically to do with my hair. That's why when I moved to New York, finding like the Dominican hair salons, I was like, they know what's going on, you know. But all of these important moments, but also just like the smearing the coconut. I mean, literally, like, remember when we were on my Zoom and like everybody knows it's like to shower as a Black person is to smear your body in lotion. Like, there's not a complete bathing experience without moisturizing after. Like, that's just not a thing that we do. You know, like every time I got out of the bath, my mom, it was like head to toe. There was some leave-in hair product because my hair was always like dreaded, actually, like hippie poor. And then like covered in like lotion or oil and stuff, you know, and these are kind of practices that I've carried through my whole life. Like at the Zoom, everyone was like, oh my God, she's moisturizing.
Yeah, Johnny, don't you know how long it's going to be? A good another 10 minutes. I want to switch gears slightly to how this childhood experience led to you becoming a model and a body advocate, because it's, was this a pathway that you saw? Was being a model something that you ever thought was available to you as a career, as a child, when you were, you know, trying to fit in and trying to experiment and figure out what was going on?
Absolutely not. I thought that like when I was really young, I've always wanted to write. I love to write. It was one of like my earliest hobbies. So I was like, oh, maybe I was into like clothes. Thing is, I've always been into style and I've always been into clothes, but I was not really into like fashion. Like I could not know, like, I don't know. It took me like till 4 years ago to know that like Loewe was Loewe and not low. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't charted to know this kind of stuff, but style always really interested me. And I also was always as a kid, even though I was like shy at times, I was always very performative. So I did see potentially some future in like talking to people, like something, whether it was being a journalist, I honestly wanted to be on TRL. Like I thought that would be like the coolest thing ever. Like I thought Lala was I thought like Suchin Pak was like the coolest girl ever. I wanted to be like on MTV News. But modeling, absolutely not. I think I grew up the era, like the supermodel was like Gemma, it was baby doll era. So it was like Gemma Ward, Natasha Poly, like, what's her name? Daria Werbury, like those were the icons. And there was just so much separation. Like I don't even think that I compared myself to those models because it was so far away. Like it was so distant. It was so affluent. It was so tall. It was so thin. It was so white. I was just like, there's no way. So blonde, so baby. Like I just couldn't. I really compared like my body to my peers, predominantly. And I think it was
looked up to at the time, or like when was the first time that you saw yourself reflected? Like for me, I remember in the UK when I was growing up, the women who were popularized were like Pamela Anderson, Caprice, TV shows that had like blonde hair and big boobs, like
Carmen Electra.
Carmen Electra, not so much Carmen Electra because it wasn't super Americanized in the UK yet. Like, we didn't have cable that much, but it was definitely like any derivative of Pamela Anderson. And then all of a sudden, the year I turned 16, J-Lo brought out her first album and it changed the game. It was the first time that I remember like the boys around me being like, oh my God, she's fit. And she's like, even though she looked very like white on that first album, it was the first time that I saw curvy body, like brown skin, and then Beyonce brought out her album. And I remember that summer, when I turned 16, I was suddenly in fashion. My body
right.
like, and the whole time I basically acted like the tomboy friend to all, because I played a lot of sport and played football and stuff as well, but I was never like the aspirational look until that summer. And I remember collecting my GCSE results, which is a bit like your SAT score. Yeah, I remember collecting my GCSE results in a gold halter neck top and like boot cut denim and thinking I was like J-Lo, like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
When was the moment when you saw an image that you were like, that's my vibe?
Well, the thing is, and I think this like collates to why I do what I do, is that I don't think I ever had that moment. I think I had to always pull from like parts that I could identify with, but there was no like deep breath. There was no like sigh of relief. I think even with seeing like J-Lo, like when On the Six came out, like that was fucking iconic. And like, but I was really like at the time ashamed of like the sexiness or like the sexuality that my body held. I was very uncomfortable in it. And even though I at times participated in it, I like hated it because I wanted whatever. But so I never felt inherently very sexy. So I couldn't really connect to that. And I also like those body types to me early on sent a message that like to be curvy is to be palatable versions of such for me. Cause I wasn't like curvy. Like I was like chubby. Like I was like, so I think that like that solace that like so many people found, I was like, oh, but like I'm still imperfect. I'm still like, I don't have like a round bum and a flat stomach and thin arms. I have like weird, like tuberous breasts and like a chubby stomach. But I think that there was like some weird, like not weird, but like important revolutionary moments in where I like stepped into parts of myself. I mean, it sounds like weird, but I remember my mom like first gave me like a Kate Bush album. And I started listening to like Bjork. And then I also started to see it like listening to like Lauryn Hill and like these women that just didn't give a fuck. Like that was the thing. Like that was my aha moment that I'm like, these are women who are existing in worlds that like want them to be XYZ and are saying no and participating and creating the narrative in which like they want to create. So like those were more of my aha moments.
How did, you know, that thing you said about the palatable curvy, I totally, like, it makes me think about, there was a Lil Wayne lyric about having a flat stomach. And I remember like every time I heard that song, I can't remember what song it was, but every time a rapper talks about a flat stomach, it would make me cringe. It would literally make me feel,
my girl ain't got no stomach. Like, I'm like,
this song's not for me then, yeah? Because like I've had a baby. It would like literally make me feel some type of way. How did your modelling career actually start? Because
well,
expected for you. So how, you know, it wasn't something you were actively chasing. Like, you've obviously got a stunning bone structure, face, or a beauty look. But you weren't, you know, some people want to be models. And
the whole life. Yeah.
You didn't. Tell me how it happened for you.
Well, I think what's interesting about how, you know, people's like success stories is that it feels like so lumped, you know what I mean? Like if somebody has to like punctuate like how it happened or when it happened, but it was kind of like more drawn out than I seemed to like give energy to. I think I had gotten like a little bit more comfortable, like also growing up, I always had friends who would like take photos of me. Like Sade would always take photos of me, always doing like fun photo shoots and stuff like that. Still never thought I would be a model. I actually think that the only plus size model that I had ever seen up until that point was because Amanda, Atlanta's mom, was very close friends with Sophie Dahl. And Sophie, I remember her coming over to Atlanta's house when we were very young, and Amanda being like, Sophie's a model. And she was like 6 feet tall and like boobs and butt and like gorgeous and like porcelain skin. And I was like, wow, like I didn't know like models could look like that. I don't think I found like immense connection, but I think that was the first time that I ever saw a plus size model. But I think in high school, like it just wasn't, I was always technically plus size, but I never wore plus size clothes. So I didn't understand or know the market. Like if something didn't fit, I'd wear a boy's pants. Like if something didn't fit, I'd cut it up. Like if something didn't fit, I figured it out. Like I always had this like way of figuring it out for my body in a way that like felt like my own and felt comfortable and felt good. So I didn't feel like I had to outsource the same way. And also the plus size industry was like so commercial, so small. It was dark.
Pat McGrath, let's talk about this because this was a real definitive turning point for you.
It was the turning point.
Yeah, tell me this story. How did Pat find Paloma?
Well, there's like a lot of people apparently who still, not a lot of people, a few people who are like, I introduced Pat to you and blah, blah, blah. And Pat's like, I found you on Instagram. Whatever it is, I actually don't know who was the bird or if she saw it, but she saw something in me that I think for the first time in my life, she saw something in me that I had never seen for myself, which was to be an image, a face, a body, a person in modeling and in the fashion industry that like had purpose. I think that up until that point, I still felt very fragile and like where I would ever fit. And so I was kind of taking scraps or I was just being very like, you know, blasé about it. It wasn't that it wasn't happening, but it lacked focus. And Pat's hand in that change was the stamp that I needed for myself, especially because the way that she invited me into her world, which is so intimate, she didn't want to change anything about me. You know, it wasn't like even coming in, like there was no conversation around my body. She's like, I'm launching a makeup line. You have a perfect face for makeup. I think you look amazing in a red lip and a wing, and let's do, like, that's what you look amazing in too. Like, you have a perfect face for this. Like, it wasn't about like, oh my God, like perfect face for a big girl. It was none of that. But I also found her existing in her identity as she was, as successful as she was. Yeah, like the affirmation that I needed, that it's possible, like, you know, plus size, Black, brilliant, talented, extroverted. You know, when Pat walks in the room, like, you know it. Like, her energy is infectious, and I felt really safe in the presence of that, you know? And I think from that point, we did a lot of amazing, intimate work together, you know? It's like for the first person to like truly beat your face, to be Pat McGrath, is like insane.
Yeah, right.
I remember I had to call you because I even didn't know like big wig names. Like, the thing about Pat is that I knew the imagery. Like, I knew that iconic like Richard Burbridge Pat cover of Jessica Stam with like the shadow, the rainbow shadow. Like, I knew the images. And so I think I even had to call you and be like, hey, this is a major deal. Like, this is a huge deal. I was like, okay, all right, okay.
At Beautystack, we believe in increasing the power of beauty and wellness professionals around the world. Whether that's industry power, economic power, or simply the power to manage your career on your own terms, we got you. Beautystack helps you grow your business through our app. You can build your portfolio, be discovered by clients in our home feed, and take bookings and payments all directly from your content. Because likes and shares don't put food on the table. Join the Beautystack community and download the app for free from the App Store today. Now, back to the show.
After Pat McGrath launched your career with your incredible makeup looks, mainly having these close-up shots of your face, your modeling career really took off, and the lens zoomed out to your body and your overall image and look. Around this time, would you say that's when you started to become a body advocate and be thinking about how your body occupied the space in the fashion industry and in the modeling world?
No, actually. Because once I started working, and then once I got subsequently signed, the high of just like being a model wore off so quickly. I inherently and like cellularly like do not survive or feel nourished off of just like exclusively like superficial interactions, work, like any of it. So I knew also I was in college, and I dropped out of college too when I got signed. And like, as my career was kind of like taking off, there wasn't time for both. And I knew even pre, that like, the model activist movement, that like, if I was going to do this, it had to be with purpose. It had to be so I could create more space. I did not have the option for my body to not be the central part of my career, just as I've never had the luxury or the option for not to be the central part of my existence. So I knew going into it that like, if I didn't intentionally participate in my career and like grab any opportunity to like do an interview, to really just show what I was about and what I was there to do, then it wouldn't have worked. And like for a second I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I'm doing e-com or whatever. But even then, I was like, this isn't working. And so I actually had called my agents at the time, and I was like, I want to be doing more of this stuff, which luckily, like, I feel really grateful. And I think when a lot of people ask me about how to get into modeling or like what I did, I kind of had like a soft laser focus because a lot of opportunities came to me, but they came out of also intention. Like I was like, my focus was always like, I want to create space. I don't want to have to sacrifice who I am. I want this to be like nuanced. I want there to be inclusivity on a level that like speaks to a full spectrum of person, not just like, oh, inclusivity because she's fat, or oh, inclusivity because she's brown, but it's like, oh, inclusivity because she's strange, or oh, inclusivity because she speaks her mind, or oh, you know, so all of these things. But I was provided with like, not even provided, but I think I was lucky enough to step into an industry that there was a small gate, like a small opening in wanting to lean into that.
So one of the things that I've always admired about you is how you were very intentional about your career and you shaped your career the way that you wanted it. And while on one hand, I think like, you know, no one wants to be middling in their career doing anything. It just doesn't surprise me because if you're like, you already have an innate style, you already have taste, you're not going to just do piddly little jobs. Tell me about the way that you shaped your career and what advice would you give to people who want to choose the work they do and not settle for any old job, for scraps, as you call it?
Well, I think it first started with, if you are presented with an opportunity, one, don't take it for granted. And I think in my experience, I was presented with a life-changing opportunity, and it wasn't without effort, but like at the beginning it was without focus, and if I was sustaining off that without focus, I don't think that I would still be here or would have been able to achieve the things that I have achieved.
Even when you just said, you know, what I've achieved and you put it in like air quotations, it made me think, why do we still do that as women? It's like, you can just say that you absolutely smashed it. Like we joke, like 4 or 5 years ago, our friend crew of International Girl Crew, we were all doing such different things. And one by one, it was like, you know, I've gone from being a nail salon owner to a tech entrepreneur. And then you were like, I've gone from working in a shop to being a model. And then it was like, no, we're a supermodel. And, you know, we had Madeline earlier and Madeline was like, I've gone from being a nail artist to now being a designer. So I think you should be proud of the progression you've made and the way that you have had choice and you've designed the life that you want and the things you have, because you know, that imposter syndrome of putting that achieved in quotation marks is something that you're never going to, you know, it's going to be very difficult over the years to lose that. It's something that both hinders us and drives us as successful people. So, you know, just my 2 cents on that. What is next for you, Paloma?
Well, you hear about my...
Oh, wait there. Let me summarize what you just said, because I actually think you had, let me summarize what you just said, because you had some amazing points there. Firstly, you knew yourself. You knew the image you wanted to create. Then you took a visioning and a manifesting approach. You created Google Drives and mood boards, and you were like, these are the things I want to do. This is who I want to work with. Then I think this is really cool what you said about your agent process being collaborative. So it's like, find the people that will help you get to the next stage in your career and work in partnership with them. And then I think this is so critical and something that people miss out on. And as a startup, it's what we think about every single day. It's like, what is the work I need to put in to get me to the next milestone? Because otherwise you could be doing the same old thing endlessly. I call it like busy doing nothing. It's like being a hamster on a wheel. You seem like you're going really fast, but you're not actually going anywhere. So I think those are such good tips for anyone, model or otherwise, in terms of controlling their career.
And I have one more tip.
Oh, go on.
Surround yourself with like-minded, progressive people.
been using this time to think about your next move?
Yeah, I think that I've spoke to you. I think also in my own career, I think this is like just an important business practice and advice, is like find what in your industry doesn't exist and try and fill that.
This is the section of the podcast about your beauty stack. So it's all of the people that keep you looking beautiful, keep you sane, keep you healthy, and particularly for you, keep you in a job. So let's start at the top of the stack. Who does your hair?
Who does my hair? Well, it depends, because that's a loaded question. Because it's like, people do my hair every day who, for different things. On my own, like if I just want to get like a classic, like blowout, like feeling cute, I still go to the Dominican salon. It's on Clinton and Rivington, called Yanni's. I've been going there since I moved here, almost 10 years ago, or 8 years ago, whatever. But I think for events, for my own, I work with Letitia Chong. I work with, why am I blanking on all these things? Yeah, I work predominantly with Letitia for events and stuff. And then when I want to get my hair braided, I for like vacation or something like that, I use Illy Luciano.
Where do you get your facials done?
I get my facials done essentially exclusively at Rescue Spa. I get the BioLift facial, which is like the classic, like their most classic facial, but it's Biologique's version of microcurrent, which they use on sponges. That's also like packed and like absorbed with P50 product. So when they're doing it's all snatching. It's all snatching. It's relaxing. If pre-COVID, I get a facial once a month. It's comfortable, not insane price point for me. It's like $150. So yeah, I go to Rescue Spa. You normally work with Danuta, who is the owner of Rescue Spa, but otherwise I will work with 2 other estheticians there.
You have a dermatologist as well?
Yes, I do. Her name is Shireen Idris. She is a dermatologist, cosmetic dermatologist, works in lasers and stuff. She's amazing. I have done, what do I do? I do more routinely a Clear and Brilliant, which is a baby Fraxel, which doesn't remove my freckles, but is there for texture, which is like really helpful for work with just like it's better for absorbing products, stuff like that. I've also started, this last year, I started like dermaplaning. There's this place called Glow Bar, which I like with another way, like absorption of product. I mean, I feel like I look so good after I dermaplane. Like my skin is like, but yeah, I alternate. I see Shireen, maybe I'll do Thermage, which like I know is quite early for me, which is like
what is it? What is Thermage?
Thermage is like a skin tightening treatment that goes under like your subdermal layers of skin and heats it up to produce collagen, goes into like overproduction of collagen. I started doing it maybe a year ago. I do it twice a year.
Who does your brows? What do you do to them?
I think like once every 2 months, I go to Pinky's salon, which is on 3rd Street in the East Village, just for like a reshaping and a tint. It is, but I don't go there regularly. In between, honestly, makeup artists just like clean up my brows. But I think if I get them reshaped every 2 months, or like get the shape back every 2 months, it keeps them like more in order.
What about your lashes? I've got to tell everybody that you were the first person who put me onto lash extensions.
I'm screaming.
I will never forget when I was in New York and you were like, just go to Bling Lash. And I was like, what? And I walked into this salon where there were literally like 20 beds in a row. It looked like a factory, but I personally had never seen anything like it. Even now in England, I've never seen anything like it. A row of beds where women were just lying back with curtains between, getting individual lashes stuck onto their own lashes.
Her eyes glued shut for an hour.
They look so stunning, and you had them and you told me about them, and then Camille was like, you've never seen me without lash extensions. I was like, what? And since then, I have to wear lash extensions every day now, and it's been 4 years. So I blame you for that. And you don't even wear them anymore.
I was like, damn, you're right. I used to have those. Yeah, I don't do anything. I'm obsessed with eyelash curlers now. I was using Latisse for a while just because, again, the aggression to like taking off makeup, I was losing some of my lashes. But I only use Latisse when I feel like they've just been like really like barren. But I use some castor oil when I do like my whole thing. I'll use some castor oil on my lashes and a good Shiseido eyelash curler. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. My beauty routine has simplified, or like just more in like the product space or facial, but I'll like spend way more money and time and effort on products than I will services the same way. Like I don't really get my eyelashes. I don't get my eyelashes done. I kind of rarely get my eyebrows done.
Yeah, but that's because you are on set all the time.
All the time. Yeah, exactly. I can't really have eyelash extensions.
And, that leads me on to my next question about, getting your makeup done professionally. Like, that is your job. So when you're not at work, who does your makeup when you've got a party or an event?
I mean, Pat ruined me, man. I am a total makeup snob. I'm like, what color, face, and body is that? Like, what are you doing? Like, let me see the Bobbi Brown palette. Like, I know like all of the nuances of a wing. I'm like, no, like the way that I'll describe to makeup artists, like I'm like, this one needs to be like soft, like this one needs to be like cuntier. It needs to, like there's so many different kinds of wings, different eyebrows, but this was all taught to me from having my makeup done by Pat. So I'm very specific with who I work with, from how I like to show up as myself, which is what events are. And I work with Grace On and Andrew Colvin and Raisa Flowers. I honestly don't really work with anybody else.
What about body treatments? I know you love a body treatment. Scrub.
I die for massages and body treatments. I grew up in the Korean spa, essentially in LA. It's again like a huge LA girl, like rite of passage. My mom still to this day probably goes twice. Well, not to this day, just kidding. Don't quote me on that. But like, as of 3 months ago, 3 months ago. So scrubs, I love. They don't have them in New York as much. So I use the scrubbing mitt that you can order on Amazon. But if I honestly, the most selfish thing and the thing that I miss the most out of anything right now in quarantine is getting a massage.
You don't have any tattoos or piercings, right?
No, I have a few tattoos that I would like to get removed.
What about your nail vibe? Because I know it's changed massively since you started modeling. I distinctly remember when you were like, I've got to have plain gel ballet slippers.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that now I love that. Like, I think that not modeling or modeling, I can't envision, like I always have my nails done, besides right now, but like I always have my nails and toes done. Like I just don't feel like my best self, but it's honestly always in naturals. I think it's like now kind of being in my late 20s, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, like wearing color, it's like so brash, it's so much. But I don't know if it was because of modeling, but now I just really appreciate it. And I think I have really nice nail beds, so it's like the best way to like show them off. I think it's just like a gorgeous natural color.
What about hair removal? Is that something that's important to you?
Yeah, what's also amazing about rescue spas is I think that beauty, it's interesting all the ways in which like all the purposes that it can serve, but then also the ways in which it like can hinder your life. You know, I found that I was having such a hard time when I had all of my services like spread apart, and it would like stress me out. And so I found like the mecca of experiences that made it the highest peak of like relaxation and ways that I can utilize my time best, which is something you always talk about, is that like how to use your time wisely and as a business, is that I'll just like block out 4 hours and go to rescue spa. I'll get a pedicure, I'll get a wax, and I'll get a facial. And the waxers there are incredible. I exclusively see this woman. Her name is Dee. She gets, I leave a strip for my bikini now. But she does it in like 4 hard wax pieces. It's incredible. Yeah. I was going to start my laser journey though, but COVID kind of messed me up. But I'm not, I'm not really hairy. So I don't really have leg hair or arm hair. So I think that like hair removal isn't at the forefront of like my beauty routines. But I think laser would be the next step in utilizing my time, like simplifying my beauty routine, like just like as a matter of like ease.
What about, what holistic treatments do you have? Acupuncture, Reiki?
I don't do Reiki. I've done facial acupuncture 3 times. It's not that restful for me. I'd rather just get a classic facial. But yeah, I guess I don't do too many holistic. I'd rather get some like my pimples squeezed out and some like toxic sludge rubbed on my face.
What about spiritual healers and shamans?
No, but I have a meditation practice of my own. I utilize, and I do like sound baths and things like that. But I would be interested. Honestly, I just feel that the time that I have to myself between work prior to quarantine, I prioritize the things that I like known to prioritize, which are massages. I do some like yoga practice, nothing too crazy.
What about a life coach or therapist?
I don't have a therapist right now, but I do have a person in my life who I speak very intimately and closely with about the way that my mind works. That is like really helpful and is just allowing me to like recalibrate like what a therapist would look like for me, because I broke up with my therapist about 2 years ago. And I think my needs now, I would really like to be working with a therapist that's a woman of color or person of color, however they identify, and just like kind of meeting those specific needs. But I've been in and out of therapy my whole life. It is an incredibly eye-opening and like profound experience, and something that like you don't need to be like depressed to utilize.
It's a useful self-reflection tool for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Paloma.
God, I love you. We could chat for so long.
So fun. And yeah, we could keep talking forever, but thank you so much.
If you're looking for a place to book unique treatments, or if you're a beauty professional and want to list your business with us, don't forget to download the Beautystack app for free from the App Store. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. Till next time.